I'll just talk for a couple of minutes about how I see learning space design affecting the kind of learning experiences that children have. If you talk to Building Schools of the Future and primary capital programme people now, then they talk around the flexibility of the learning space. So, for instance, as I think I mentioned the other day, the furniture would have casters on the bottom so it can be moved around. And the thinking that's central there is the fact that you wouldn't expect ordinarily to have exactly the same layout for different areas of learning. So, for instance, if you were teaching science, you might want a different classroom layout to one that you would want if you were writing poetry or creating art. And yet what tends to happen in our classrooms, largely through the necessity of the difficulty of changing classroom design, is that we set up our tables and chairs and then work with that for half a term until we have an opportunity to turn it around and have a different style in the next half term perhaps. But in real terms, that doesn't reflect what learners need, and their changing requirements for different areas of learning. The problem for a school, of course, that has been established for some period of time, is that the furniture's already been purchased. It doesn't tend to be the kind that could move or be changed, and so changing to a more flexible learning environment is obviously going to take a period of time for the school to equip that. It's my intent that that is what we'll do. We'll move so that we have more flexible spaces. But clearly there's something that needs to be done in the meantime as a school sets its priorities for how it's going to spend its money, to address those issues that perhaps don't cost very much or anything at all, but show or demonstrate that sense, embody that sense in which we're really reflecting upon the kind of learning that goes on. So to that end, what people talk about when they're talking about new school design now is that notion of what sort of experiences will a child have when they go from one place to another within your classroom. So if during the lesson the child is walking over towards a tray to get some paper or whatever that might be, then what experiences do they have through your classroom on the way there? If all they encounter are the backs of other children, they're not having any learning experiences. And so what classroom designers do is look at the space and look at the flows of where children are moving throughout different lessons to see, well, okay, 12 children are going to move across this direction in the classroom, therefore let me put some other things there that they're going to see along the way, which are going to contribute to their learning experiences. Equally, if you buy into Alistair Smith's work, then he suggests that all things for creativity, all things that stimulate creativity, should be placed high and to the right of where a child is looking. So if you imagine that in a classroom, and I'm not suggesting this will be the case, but if in a classroom you always stand at the front, next to a whiteboard maybe, teaching, and your child is facing you, then as they face you, high up to their right should be all the stimulus for creativity. So that might be things around aspects of writing and those kind of things that they would want you to look at. So all the creative stuff should be up high and to the right of the child's visual space, and all the things that you want the child to be able to recall should be up high and to the left. And so that's an important part of how you would just set out those particular aspects of your classroom, perhaps, if you were facing in one direction. But other things that we need to consider is how overstuffed the classroom is. There's a lot of research around that's suggesting that actually we have a lot less that's around the classroom, and things are simpler and easier to discriminate visually. And there's also a great deal of thought around displays and the role of displays. I know that this was the start point for Natalie's discussion this afternoon, but the issue there is around what should we expect a display to look like? If you talk to, again, to refer to Alistair Smith, if you were to talk to Alistair Smith, then he says, well, displays are all about instruction. And therefore, put all your celebrations out on the corridors. Displays should be instructing children and supporting their learning. And in that sense, we would want to see displays being interactive and something that children engage with. In a sense, they're sticky because it means that the child goes back to it again and again. However, there's another school of thought that says that actually that's very demotivating for children, and what they want to be able to do. This is the hemp underwear tree hugging brigade that think this. What they want the children to be able to do is to celebrate their work with you, and to that extent, then you would want some celebratory work, some display work on the walls. There is, however, more recently, a third school of thought around display that suggests that displays shouldn't ever be finished products, that what you want to be able to see is learning in progress, and that creates the stickiness of the display, because the child is having to go back to that display to update what they're doing around their particular area of project. And this is the area that interests me the most, because this is the first notion of displays that is really talking about learning as a dynamic thing rather than learning as a didactic sort of model that Alistair Smith refers to. So this is something that seems to cross that divide between celebration. It is the celebration of work that's been started on the one hand, and also learning in terms of this is the journey that my learning is going on as a pupil, and there it is on the wall, and it's partially completed and annotated, and so I'm describing the learning that's in place. I'm describing the kinds of decisions I'm going to be making about this particular piece of work in the future as part of the display, and as that changes it will be updated. So there's a whole notion there around what we might want display to achieve within our classroom. I think what it shouldn't be is just static wallpaper, because we'll know what that's like. You put it up and then within a very short space of time you don't see it anymore. So it has to be something which actually we're driven to engage with, and if that's the case then it needs to be very different. Does that mean that the classroom will look less tidy? Well, yes, and what's the problem with that? As long as the untidiness is constructive. If the untidiness is just laziness because you can't be bothered to put things away, that's different. But actually, if this is about your class looking less than your classroom and the displays around it looking less than perfect, well, if what leads to their lack of perfection is the fact that learning is in progress, how brilliant. That's exactly what we would want, isn't it? That we could see that this was a learning environment where learning took place, and we could see what that learning was and what the nuances to it were. That to me would be very important. And so to that end, I think there are some key things that you can do in your own classroom. Have a look at it, see whether it seems overstuffed and confusing. Think about the learning areas that you've created. Have you given different zones for children? Those children that need peace and quiet, have you got an area for that? Those children that need to be able to collaborate, have you got an area for that? Those children that need to work in small groups, is that facilitated within the way you group your tables? Or conversely, those are in larger groups? And to be much more reflective about how the way we furnish our classroom, how we arrange that furniture, how we display various different bits of the learning that are in there, the kinds of journeys that the children go on throughout that classroom. All of those, I think, contribute to some of the considerations that we can make at this early stage of our thinking around displays in your classroom.